Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:06 now this Friday morning in your nation's capital. Coming up in 30 minutes, we're going to talk to Bram Weinstein on the preview of the Commanders hosting the Bears this weekend. And the big question, of course, is who will be the starting quarterback? We'll get the latest from Bram on that. 8:35, Jamie Brennan running for Frederick County School Board. We'll talk to her as we now have early voting activated in Maryland. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka on a very special
Happy Friday.
Friday, absolutely, Patrice. Good to talk with you. I understand you just talked to our friends on Fox and Friends while I was ranting about Bill and Hillary Clinton. So I'm glad we were multitasking.
Oh, I missed your rant. But, they asked me there to talk about entitlement reform, so I couldn't say no.
Absolutely. Are you kidding? I would walk away from me in a conversation with me if I could talk about entitlement reform. Patrice, as you know, as everybody knows, I've been in Michigan all week, my home state, as I've been sort of trying to get a feel for what's really going on here in this all-important battleground state. And I'll tell you, I've got some news from the Daily Signal yesterday that there's some new polls that show what's being called a major realignment. Michigan moving toward Trump in the final stretch before the election. That's written, by the way, by a journalist there named Elizabeth Troutman Mischel.
Okay.
She is an alum of Hillsdale College, and I've been at Hillsdale College with their Dow Journalism School, teaching the what did Rush call them? The young skulls filled with mush, I believe. but that's not a good description of the students at Hillsdale College, as will be testified to right now by our next guest, Dr. Matthew Spalding. Here at Hillsdale as well. Although usually, Dr. Spalding, you're the grand poobah of the graduate school there in Washington, D.C. Here's two D.C. guys stuck in Michigan for a week.
That's right. Well, I have to come all the way to Michigan to have time with my friend Larry O'Connor. He's too busy.
It's either here in Michigan or at a Commanders game.
I do have to say, I did go to the last Commanders game against the Panthers, and we were all there, and you weren't.
I was already at Hillsdale. It's true. But next game, we'll go to the next game together. But it's good to see you here.
Good to see you.
And I got to say, the experience here at Hillsdale has been so enlightening. I mean, I've met a lot of the students who come to D.C. There's a good chunk of Hillsdale alums who work on Capitol Hill.
Outside of Michigan, our biggest alumni base is the D.C. area. Yeah. We have a lot of people in working and doing things in the public square.
I'll say it, the Hillsdale Mafia.
Our critics started calling it the Hillsdale Mafia, and of course, we love the term.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I meet them in Washington, and you can sort of tell a Hillsdale alum pretty quickly because they got their stuff together and they're really articulate and they got confidence. But I've been meeting them in the classrooms here.
Right.
I've been a guest lecturer at a couple of classes, and I've got my own class. They're incredible. They really are. Do you screen these kids ahead of? What's the acceptance process like?
Well, I mean, part of it is we have an acceptance admissions process that's probably the way it ought to be, but not the way most places do it. Most colleges,
because most colleges are trying to make
they're trying to make money. They see a student as money.
Revenue.
More students in the chairs, the more money we make, the more federal loans we get, the more money that comes in the door.
And you don't take any federal money.
We don't take any federal money, so we look at the equation differently. We lose money in every student we take. It's a different proposition. So instead, our focus is on trying to find the best fits we can. So the process at Hillsdale is very extensive. Obviously, we're looking at grades and how well the student performs, but we interview them personally. We talk to them at great length. We want to know about their family. We want to know about where they're coming from and what kind of fit they're going to be.
Yeah,
and we like to bring them here to the campus, and they attend classes. They'll sit in on classes.
So they know what they're stepping into.
So they know what they're getting into.
How does your DEI department address that, though? That's got to be a... how big is that program, by the way?
We've not started one of those yet.
Really?
We've been thinking about it, but it's so hard to define the terms. I mean, what does this mean? We're
Like man, woman,
Yeah,
things like
exactly.
that. All right.
Yeah, listen, stay far away from DEI. Thankfully, a lot of the colleges are learning their lesson that it's a bad investment. It really hits at academic excellence and academic freedom. And so I love that about the Hillsdale programming. I've seen some of it, and that's impressive about it.
To make a sidebar note, as a comparison, I'm a vice president of Hillsdale College, of course. Where we don't have this issue at all. This is just a non-issue, and we just go about teaching people and learning things. But I'm also on the board of the New College of Florida, which Governor DeSantis did with us about a year ago. So now, and one of the first things we actually did is we abolished the DEI department there.
Very good.
And
now, was that different for a state school? Was that a harder
state school? There was a vice president. It was in the admissions process, and probably the most egregious thing, the most obvious and egregious thing, is if a professor was applying for a job, they had to give a DEI statement, which means there was a threshold.
Horrible.
You had to get by to even get a job interview. So we abolished all that and moved the head of the DEI department to food services. So we didn't fire her.
So
we thought that was
cafeteria, a lunch lady.
so we didn't fire her. We thought that would be inappropriate, but we made sure she was moved to another job. We've found her other employment.
That's
that
not
has
a bad
DeSantis's blessing, of course.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I love that.
Now, Matt, I would love for you to just weigh in on the election. You guys are talking to students about, and I know Larry's teaching on just the media. From the start of this year until now, how many massive Pulitzer-winning stories have gone under the radar, from 2 assassination attempts to the kicking off of a presidential candidate and the anointing of another one with 0 votes? I mean, what is it? What are you telling students about this election cycle?
Historically, this is an extraordinary election, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, if you just think about it from an historical point of view, the number of things you mentioned, and I'm sure we come up with a lot more. This is an extremely unusual election cycle. It will go down historically to be studied.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. What has been overlooked here, and one of the I think one of the mistakes that the left made in this election cycle, which was a vulnerability, I will admit, of Trump, is Trump himself. That is his personality, his certain degree of unpredictableness, all the things we both know and love. But that gave an opening, and of course they completely overplayed it. I'm struck by one of the things that makes me think that things are moving in a direction in his favor is the extent to which they are now really doubling down on the claim that he's not just seems to be a fascist, but it actually is a fascist.
Yeah.
They've kind of upped the game as if it couldn't be upped anymore. Well, but the fact that it's been so focused on him as an individual, as a personality, I think has caused us to overlook the tectonic things that are going on underneath in this election and this whole cycle, and what Trump represents in the long cycle of politics since for 10 or 20 years or so. And I think there's something much deeper and larger going on here that the Trumpism and the radicalness of the Democratic Party to some extent have really masked.
Right.
That's now starting to come out towards the end of the election here, in my opinion. Right.
If Trump's so bad and he's such a fascist and all the things that you said about him and a criminal and a felon and blah, 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 and yet he's actually leading in the polls right now, isn't that a reflection on you and your policies and your candidates and where you want?
It tells us a lot about where they're going, what they don't have left to talk about.
All right, so hold that there, because in a moment we're going to continue with Dr. Spalding here because of your role as the Vice President of Washington Operations and Dean of that Van Andel Graduate School of Government. You, I think, have a good perspective on, number one, what this next administration might look like. No matter who the president is, they want to get a lot done, and a lot of them, both candidates, are sort of talking about circumventing Congress. I think Congress, with probably a new majority in the Senate, is going to have something to say about that. But also, something that's not being discussed anywhere, Dr. Spalding, if Trump wins, what does Biden's last 2 months look like? And what's he going to try to get away with, and the Democrats try to get away with before he gets inaugurated? So we'll continue with that in a moment. It's 7:15, WMAL Traffic and Weather.
Traffic and Weather, brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
We continue with Dr. Matthew Spalding. He runs the Washington, D.C. campus for Hillsdale College, that Van Andel Graduate School of Government, which I've been talking about a lot. But by the way, you're here to sort of screen some of the students to move on to that program, right, potentially
Correct.
with scholarships. You're still taking applications in the D.C. area? And who are you looking for, by the way?
Well, it's two different things. So I'm here on campus to interview undergraduates to come on our what we call our WIP program. We like the name of that one, WIP program.
All right.
Washington Hillsdale Internship Program.
You're that hard on them, huh?
Yes. Well, we have a WIP program for the undergraduates, and we give our graduate students a master's degree. So it's very
You are so politically incorrect.
So I'm interviewing undergraduates and giving scholarships, and they will come out for the WIP semester. I'm talking to the new WIPs coming out in the spring, but then separately we have the graduate school, and we're taking applications to graduate school actually right now to start the graduate program in January.
So anyone who works in Washington or and has some sort of interface with the government, either actually as a staffer or maybe for an agency, or if their profession right now interacts with the government, or perhaps if they would like to do that, this would be the program for them.
And we think about it a little bit differently strategically. Most schools in Washington, D.C., everyone has a master's degree. That's how they make money. If you work for the government, by the way, the Congress or the administration, you can go to a school in the Washington, D.C. area and essentially get a free education because the government will forgive your student loans.
GW, Georgetown, American.
So we have a different strategy, which is we try to find the best people who are already in Washington. They're already working in the Senate or the House or in the administration, and we give them on top of that a Hillsdale education because they really do study a course. We study political thought, read some Shakespeare, a lot of politics and history. And then kind of send them on their way. So we're actually thinking strategically about who are the people we want in Washington, which is why they call it the Hillsdale Mafia. We really are thinking strategically about where we want to place people and how do we want to affect it through but by teaching them, by educating them,
by
about
actually
the
educating
ideas.
them about the
Very
that's
good.
fantastic.
Very good. So, Dr. Spalding, I mean, we're going to have a couple of months left in lame duck. Congress will probably come back. What are you expecting to see in this last Congress? And anything you want to see in the next Congress? Anything exciting? Fingers crossed that the conservatives are able to take both the House and take the Senate and keep the House.
Well, I think. Look, the elections aside for a moment, the hard thing in Washington and in American politics right now is governing. But part of that is we have to back up for a second. Why is that? I mean, it's because Congress really doesn't govern anymore. Congress doesn't do as much. So much authority has shifted to the American presidency. That's a longer term problem. All the things I would love to see for a Congress to do would really take a strong Congress and a president who will be wanting to work with a Senate and a House of his party to do so. And that's reclaiming the budget process and reclaiming their authority, which in theory could happen. I think there's an outside chance here that if Mr. Trump does well, I think it's pretty safe that the Senate will remain Republican, it looks like. But he could, if he does well, he'll pull the House and it'll be close. And now, can you govern with that? That'll be difficult. I mean, I think let's assuming that's two scenarios here. One is he wins, he loses, I suppose.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there are only two scenarios. Is that a fair?
Well, actually, I've got a question about that too. But you make a point. I mean, regardless of who the chief executive might be, both of them seem to be talking about what they want to use executive power for. They don't talk a whole lot about working with Congress.
Well, so this is part of the modern problem. Now, one of the things I would worry about if I were a Trump administration after an election, a successful election coming in, is I would expect there will be massive amounts of executive orders and other executive actions in the last part of the Biden administration, with the intention of tying his hands as much as possible. Yeah, because the Democratic strategy will really turn to litigation and blocking.
So Team Biden, it's not Joe, but whoever's doing things for Joe, they'll start instituting all of these things in the last weeks of their administration.
I'm sure they're already planning these things out.
The second Trump tries to implement his agenda, that's a lawsuit. It's a trial.
Exactly. Or it just makes it more difficult to root out and find all these things.
I hope that Team Trump recognizes that.
I think Team Trump does, and they've got a lot of people.
Right?
But so the effect of this, however, is I think this is how you got to fight the battle, and this is what's got to be done. But the effect in the larger sense is that you're just augmenting executive power, and Congress is sitting this one out. And that's unfortunate, because what Congress needs to do is get into the game. Now, I do think that if Trump is successful and has a Congress, a lot of the things he wants to do really will require Congress to do some things.
And this Congress is more inclined, I think, to work with a Trump presidency than the last Congress he had.
Yeah, the big thing will, and this is where, in a certain sense, we're kind of getting back to, there's some signs here that politics actually works again. If he wins in a significant way, you're already seeing Senate candidates in the Democratic Party in their commercials and things, suggesting they aren't that unfriendly to some of these Trump issues.
Democrat candidates in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin have all sort of said, yeah, we work with Trump.
And they're not going to Kamala Harris events. They're not showing up.
But at the same time, Kamala Harris is calling him Hitler.
Right.
So they're saying, yeah, we work with Hitler. So, which brings me to my last question here, again, in terms of the historical aspect of this, the constitutional process. This is an extraordinary thing. Kamala Harris yesterday said flat out, Donald Trump is a fascist.
Right.
If he wins, she as vice president will preside over the Electoral College and certify that ballot. Is it time now to start challenging Kamala Harris, saying, should he win, will you accept those results?
I think that would be an excellent question to push on her as well. So, remember how how a realignment actually works in politics is when you force a question and force a question to be answered. She is forced a question, but it's the wrong question, and it's not a good question for her.
Yeah.
She's running on that he's a fascist. I think she will lose that bet. And because one of the things he's coming in is people are now realizing, especially I think J.D. Vance in that debate really underscored this. There are not a bunch. I might disagree with him on a few things, but they're really not. Well, they're not crazy. They're not weird.
Yeah,
what are you talking about? That has a huge effect. Because most politicians who aren't as radical as Harris and Walz will have to work with him.
Yeah.
And that's going to reshape politics for some time, I think, because you'll see new coalitions coming up.
Yeah.
And is reaching into the Democratic base and workers and middle class and union. All sorts of interesting things going on. You just kind of feel the tectonic plates moving. And if that plays out that way, this is going to be a very interesting 4 years, and then beyond that, 'cause I think this will have a lasting effect. This kind of election is really abrasive, because the question will be for the left whether liberalism in the old sense makes a break with the more radical wokeism of late, and decides that that wasn't that great of an idea.
And that young generation of students currently at Hillsdale and in your graduate program in Washington, D.C., they're the ones who will, sort of steer us through that new dawn that we might be.
Are you saying it's not us?
Oh, yeah, I'm done.
We're out of here.
My God, please. I'm exhausted.
Oh, no, guys,
Aren't
come on.
you? Real fast, Dr. Matthew Spalding, Hillsdale College. Quick, just when you talk to your students about this election, do you say, do you have any idea what you're living through right now? This really is so historic.
It is hard to capture that for a student.
Yeah.
But
for many of them, this may be the first presidential election they've really sort of focused on, right?
Well, but also a lot of young people are moved by a sense of hope. I mean, one of the things. I was a student when Ronald Reagan was first running and then was elected, and someone who actually tells them that there's a possibility of changing the direction of their country in some way.
Yeah,
that changes how they think about the future.
Yeah,
and that'll draw in a lot of people to this thing. Now the question is what it becomes and what he does with that and how he proceeds.
Patrice, do you hear that hope and optimism? This is
I
what
love it.
You walk the sidewalks of Hillsdale, and this is what it's like to be here. I might just
Hillsdale is all about the joy.
Jeez. But
all right, enough. You found the joy that was lost from the campaign.
But it's joy properly understood.
Thank you, Dr. Spalding, and
thanks
you for being a great host here at Hillsdale.
Thanks, Doctor.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now. Thanks for tuning in to this O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 8:35, Jamie Brennan ready for Frederick County School Board. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Are you ready for a big football weekend, Patrice?
I am. Football, Americano, and football.
Absolutely. Shoot. All right, let's get right to it. Of course, The big football weekend really begins with Navy Notre Dame up in New York at MetLife Stadium. Phenomenal game. But then on Sunday, if you're just into the NFL, well, yeah, Commanders and the Bears. That should be a good game. But the big question, Bram Weinstein, and you know what the question is, it's the only question. Who's going to be in the huddle for the offense as the quarterback on that first play? Come on, you've got inside info. Is Jaden back?
Well, wait a minute. First things first, the bigger question, we need your support. Are you not 100% Larry? Do I sense you're not feeling particularly well? Because we need you this weekend, Larry.
Hold on. You need me as a backup quarterback? That's not a good sign.
we need everybody. We need everybody at 100%. So whatever it takes to get you up to speed for Sunday, we need that.
No, I'm good. I'm all in. If Navy beats Notre Dame, then you've got me 1,000%. But yes.
On Jaden Daniels, I don't know. We're still at a point where he hasn't practiced yet. And we're waiting for Dan Quinn to give us an update today. We'll probably get a hint at practice, if he does go out there. Today is a walkthrough day, so they won't wear pads. So it won't be the final sign. But if he's at least out there running some plays and going through the walkthrough, then I think there's a possibility he will play. The team's been very careful with players to this point. They were with Brian Robinson when they held him out before the Ravens game, even though he probably could have played. They've been careful with a couple other defensive players to make sure that their long-term health was okay. They let them heal. So, my lean is that they want to be protective of him. And at the same time, this is a big game. 5-2 versus 4-2. A couple teams that are eyeing the playoffs this year. It's a big game this weekend.
Yeah, and listen, Mariota looked great, and having a talented quarterback like that as the backup is certainly that's exactly why he was acquired. But the Bears' defense is not the Panthers' defense, Bram. And so what's the concern here?
They are very good at all three levels. Now, they could be injured, too. Two of their better players in their secondary may miss this game, Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon. So we'll have to see how that kind of factors into everything. Our old buddy Montez Sweat is back. People may remember him.
Yes.
Signed a near $100 million deal when they traded him to Chicago last year. Their defense, metrically and visually, is top 10 and legitimate. They're very good up front. They bring a lot of pressure. They've caused a tremendous amount of turnovers, which is, I think, one of the kind of underrated keys to Washington's success this year. Is they haven't really turned the ball over very much. They've been very protective of the ball. They don't have more than one turnover in any game this year, and multiple times they've had none. So that's a big deal. And with Mariota out there as opposed to Jaden Daniels, that's the fear for me, honestly, if he's going to be playing. They're going to bring a lot of pressure on him. I would assume that Chicago is going to try their best to try to limit Washington's run game, get him into third and long situations, and force him to throw. And that's where we just haven't seen him. I mean, like what was pointed out yesterday by Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, which I think was the amazing part of how he performed against Carolina, was he hadn't taken reps with the first team in almost 70 days and then went out there and ended up scoring 30 points in relief. But to your point, and I agree with you, this is not the same defense. Chicago played Carolina a couple weeks ago and beat them 38-10. It was the same thing. They just kind of ran the ball down their throat. That's a marginalized group. So this is a very, very different test. It's not one I don't think they could pass. It's going to be different if Jaden doesn't play, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, what about the Bears' offense? I mean, is there anything that the Commanders can exploit there?
So that's the fun part of this one. Their quarterback's the number one overall pick, Caleb Williams. Our quarterback obviously was the number 2 overall pick. So I think, that's the other little kind of showcase headline disappointment if this doesn't happen. We were going to get the first ever matchup between these two players. And also Caleb Williams is from the area, Prince George's County, played at Gonzaga College High School, starred there, ended up going to college, won a Heisman Trophy. I mean, so he's coming home. But I will say this, and he's had a good season, but not a Jaden season. Jaden's had unprecedented numbers. Yeah, I mean, it's my opinion that they're both going to end up being very good. But Jaden's career has started off like a rocket ship. He is posting historic numbers that no rookie quarterback has ever posted. He still leads the NFL in completion percentage, which if that were to last throughout the entire year, he'd be the first rookie to do that since 1939. And in 1939, they were throwing maybe 6 passes a game, right? Caleb Williams, his season His season didn't start this way. They were 1-2. They could have easily been 0-3. He had 2 touchdowns, 4 picks. His completion percentage was low even for a veteran. It was very low, and it's flipped. They had some meetings. I guess there was kind of the players got together with their coaches there. I mean, that's their story to tell, and their offense has turned around. And in the last 2 weeks, they've scored 5 offensive touchdowns in back-to-back games, and that was the first time their team has done that since the 1950s. So both of these teams it's really similar. Both of these teams have been looking for their guy for a very, very, very long time. Their Hall of Fame quarterbacks date from another era. Both of them, same thing. And we're hoping, just for the marquee, I'm hoping to see these two play each other, even though it feels a little unlikely with Jaden's injury, because I do feel like it's going to be the first of many between these two teams and these two quarterbacks. I think they both have their guy. They're just kind of moving at different paces right now.
Two teams with a storied history in the NFC. They have been on some sad times, both programs, for a while, and now they're both looking good with their rookie quarterbacks. It is a great storyline. Bram, real fast, this is a 4:25 kickoff. Are you expecting a game time decision? Are you expecting not to know until Sunday morning? I ask because a lot of fantasy football lineups are depending on this.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know the answer to that either. Dan Quinn promised an update today.
Okay.
It doesn't mean he's gonna tell you what they're gonna do, but he's gonna.
Right,
I think
but you'll get an update.
If it's a possibility that, if nothing else, I think he would potentially, and I don't think they'll do this, rule him out. But I really, really doubt that they're going to tell the Bears what they're going to do. There seems to be no reason to do that. So I would say this. Wake up early, listen to Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. They'll know before anyone else knows
there you go.
whether
That's
he's
true.
actually going to play or not. Yeah.
All right. And finally, and most importantly, hypothetically, if a friend of yours and radio colleague from Washington happened to be on location in Michigan for the next several days and needed some Lions-Titans tickets this Sunday, could you hook them up, hypothetically?
Lions-Titans. Okay. So the best I can tell you is, do you know Dan Miller, the voice of the Lions? Because he's a former local and probably was a fan of yours. So I would say just cold call my buddy Dan Miller and tell him you're coming up there, and he may hook you up with that.
There you go.
There
That's
you
a
go.
good tip.
Wow.
I appreciate it, Bram, which is another way of Bram saying, I can't do anything for you. Thanks, Bram.
Lions. You know I don't work for either one of those teams, right?
No, I know. And Lions tickets are insane right now in Detroit. It's a good thing to see. Last time I saw them, it was in the Pontiac Silverdome, and there were a lot of empty seats. All right, Bram, enjoy the game.
Bram.
It's going to be a good one.
Miss anything? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
If you don't know, that is the crooning of a Mrs. Beyonce. But Beyonce is scheduled to appear at a Harris rally today. She's going to be in Houston, Texas. Not surprisingly, because I'm sure the tight Senate race between Ted Cruz and his Democratic opponent could probably use a boost from the Queen Bee herself. And Beyonce joins this long list of celebrities that the Democrats are trotting out right now in these last days to try to get black folks, women, certain demographics, old white dudes to come out and support her. I say old white dudes, Larry. I say old white dudes. I say old white dudes just because they also had Bruce Springsteen in Atlanta last night at another big star-studded event.
He is an old white dude. It isn't. I love the fact that Beyonce to the left. You can't get further to the left than Kamala right now, and that is where they're taking it. I don't think that's going to go over well in Texas. Apparently, the rumor, Sam Stein of, I think he's at Politico now, he tweeted out that Kamala is going to Texas to appear with the Democrat Senate candidate there and talk about abortion. Ted Cruz retweeted that and said, "I'm Ted Cruz and I approve this message." I mean, he's welcome to this. And what a waste of time. Texas is not going for her. So why do this in Texas, Patrice? Because I remember when Hillary Clinton was trying to make the final case, she had Beyonce, but they were in Philly. They were trying to win Pennsylvania.
it makes me wonder that if they've really just given up on Pennsylvania at this point.
Wow.
I mean, it's interesting to think they were in Georgia last night in Atlanta. You had all these. You had Springsteen. You had Barack Obama was out there. Tyler Perry, who's a hometown guy, but also blasted President Trump. And interestingly, Tyler Perry, who is creeping up into the billionaire status, he may not be there yet, but massive media mogul, is talking about how he didn't see himself in the American dream, as though black people don't see themselves in the American dream.
So more
you can't
racial
get more American
divisions.
dream than Tyler Perry, who rose from nothing to grow a fantastic media career.
Yeah, and by the way, if anybody was keeping him down and out of the American dream, it was the racist leftists in Hollywood who didn't accept any of his
didn't want to give Medea movies a
He had
chance.
to start his own studio and raise his own money to make his money
Yes.
with his films because of the racist Harvey Weinstein types. By the way, it makes sense to me that she's trying to drum up the urban vote in Atlanta and get Tyler Perry there and Obama and
Spike Lee,
Spike Lee.
Yeah.
But so how does Bruce Springsteen fit into that crowd? And by the way, can we listen to him? Because honestly, this sounds like a dead cat suffering on the side of the road. Listen to Bruce here.
They'll be carving you up all right. Say you gotta stay hungry. Well, I'm just about starving tonight. I'm dying for some action. I'm sick of sitting around here trying to write this book.
All right, so let me just say, we have all been to the we've all been to the karaoke bar when that guy will not get off the stage and he continues to try to do that. That's painful.
bad. You know, it just doesn't.
It's all
work.
fake. It's all phony.
Yes.
There's nothing authentic about it. By the way, Trump has his own celebrity endorsement. Actor, director, legend Mel Gibson was tracked down by TMZ at an airport yesterday, asked about the election. Here's what Mel had to say.
The president is being voted on in days. What's your thoughts?
Oh, man, that's a big question.
Or Trump?
I don't think it's going to surprise anyone who I vote for.
Well, so, I mean, I'm going to guess.
We go in. Yeah.
I'm going to guess Trump. Is that a bad guess?
I think it's a pretty good guess.
Well, what do you think the world will be like in a second term with President Trump's second term? A lot of people
I know what it'll be like if we let her in.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And that ain't good.
Yeah. Well,
miserable track record. Appalling track record. No policies to speak of.
Yeah. And the border, right?
And she's got the IQ of a fence post.
Ooh, ouch. Yikes.
By the way, have you noticed that when Mel Gibson talks about American politics, he loses the Australian accent? That's pretty wild, isn't it?
He sounds pretty normal. Yeah, it's pretty American to me.
So there you go. You got Mel Gibson, who says he's voting for Trump because Kamala has the IQ of a fence post, or you can pick Bruce Springsteen, who is singing like he's been constipated for 2 months and he's still trying to, have a growler there on the stage. That's your choice. It's up to you. Choose your fighter, America. 754.
You can't start a fire